Hello and welcome to the Clare Valley Podcast, brought to you by the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council, keeping you informed on the latest council news, upcoming projects and community events in the area. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer. Coming up, you'll hear all the colour and activity from the recent Naidoc event held at the Clare Showgrounds.
And now here we are today in Clare Valley. Something that I thought will never happen has happened now. So that's a wonderful thing. That's what it means when you're actively willing and eager to share a culture with other nations. It's really important that we build these bridges, have wonderful, respectful and mindful relationships with each other.
Also, would your community be interested in taking over the ownership of their local RSL hall or council building? Council is currently reviewing 30 of its built assets. And we'll head to Tarlee, where you'll meet a man who has dedicated 5 decades of his life to serving the Tarlee community. But first, let's get the latest from council headquarters. The Clare Sports Club has asked Council for a $500,000 loan to assist them in building its new sports club at the Clare Oval. Dr. Helen McDonald, the CEO of the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council, explains.
With all the money that the federal and state governments are being thrown around in the face of COVID, there's now pressure with contractors and also material supplies. So, as I'm sure many of the audience actually know, the cost of construction has gone up significantly. For the Clare Sports Club, that's in the order of $500,000. And so they're looking towards council to provide a loan to help bridge that gap so they don't have to reduce the scope of the design of their building and other infrastructure they're looking to put in place.
So at this stage, council has not approved that loan. Why is that?
Council considered it at its January meeting and they felt at this stage that the risk was too great for council to carry a loan of that magnitude, essentially because they felt the information that was provided by the Clare Sports Club was not sufficient for a decision. What they're looking for is some way that their risk can be mitigated, to understand that some of the money that the sports clubs say that they have, it does actually exist. So they would like to see verification. And they also want more information about how the sports club proposed to raise the money to pay back the loan, because they will need to find, in addition to whatever their other running costs are, the costs to pay back the loan will be in the order of $50,000, potentially more depending on what happens with interest rates.
If the Clare Sports Club can't get their hands on this money, what will they have to do?
I wouldn't think that they have to cancel the whole project. I think they would need to go and look at the scope of their project. At the presentation they made in early November, that was my understanding what they were doing, because they knew at that stage that they did have a gap in their funding and they had indicated they were going to look at the scope of the project. So I assume that they do have some ideas about how they could scale it back if necessary.
The Council's Development and Community Department has had an exceptional year in terms of development applications. 46 dwelling applications were approved in 2021 compared to 18 the previous year. This significant increase has prompted discussions as to whether there's a lack of land available and, in particular, larger allotments to meet current demand around Clare in particular. A commission report suggests whether council needs to consider future rezoning of residential and rural living land. Dr. Helen McDonald.
Yes, there is forecast to be a shortage of residential land, and there's also a shortage of rural living land, which is always challenging because they're quite much larger blocks, and so you need lots of land for rural living. So that's the conundrum that council is faced with, and the geography of Clare particularly makes expansion challenging because you could just end up extending along the valley, and if you go south you'll end up joining up with Seven Hills and go beyond, which then changes the characteristic of the valley and what makes it so special. But there are opportunities of areas that they're currently what I call deferred urban, or that can be opened up for residential. But over the longer term, yes, council's going to have to do a bit of hard thinking about if it wants to grow the population, then how is it going to do that in a way that doesn't compromise the character of the Clare Valley.
The area or some of the land around the Clare High School has been potentially earmarked as land that could be further developed?
Yes, there's a number of areas that are zoned for potential residential, and yes, there's others that we would need to look at, and that's the challenge, is trying to identify areas, as I indicated earlier, where you've got geography that's against you. And
the demand seems to be for larger allotments opposed to smaller allotments.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so in the last review of the plan for the Clare Valley, not the Clare Valley, for Clare itself, there was a change to allow for smaller allotments. People don't seem to want that. They prefer to have a larger allotment. So although we might have quite a number of residential allotments within Clare itself, they're not under great demand. People, they want a larger block to build on.
It's been recommended as part of this report that council work more closely with land developers, because I understand that developers don't necessarily find it attractive to come to the rural areas because they have to fork out more for infrastructure. Is that right?
No, I think it's really about their ability to make money. Okay. They cannot necessarily make the money on a development like they would in the metro area. It's just the costs of building and the cost that they can charge for building. So the market economy, that doesn't work in their favour, so they tend not to be interested in operating in regional areas. There's the encouragement in terms of councils working more with developers, but that is then to work out ways to make it more attractive to them, which means ratepayers or council taking on more of the cost burden. So that is, council picking up the cost of infrastructure that normally a developer would do as part of the development. The standard kind of format in the metro area is, if you want to develop this area, yes, you're going to need roads, you're going to need this, and that is part of the cost of the development. But the proposal is that council looks at picking up that cost.
Council hasn't made a decision on any of the recommendations in the report at this point, but discussions will continue and a list of proposals will be put to Council as to how they can move forward. You can access the full report on the Council's website. And finally, there's been changes to local government reform, which will make councils more accountable.
Probably some of the most interesting things from a point of view of the ratepayer is that there's been a number of things that have been set up which will allow ESCOSA, which has been a decision of the government, to come in and oversee some of the decision making that is made by council, particularly in relation to finances and rating. So this was a process that was adopted by the government in lieu of it not getting through rate capping. So what now will happen, and the decisions have set this up, is that ESCOSA will be looking at councils' budgets in relation to their long-term financial plans and strategic plans. And so if councils start putting in big projects into a budget that have not been in their long-term financial plan and not in strategic plans, then presumably questions will be asked. I'm not quite sure what the process is, but I think it's a process to stop councils just hiking up rates at a significant rate. But rate rises are to be in relation to, the cost and increases in cost, but not sort of an out of the blue kind of decision about some piece of expensive infrastructure.
It sounds to me like it's making councils more accountable for their decisions.
Yeah, it is. It's around accountability. So personally, I think it's probably a good thing to ensure that the decisions that council are making are decisions that the community has been informed about and knows about.
It's Dr. Helen McDonald, Chief Executive of the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council. In each community, you will always have the hidden gem, the unsung hero, that volunteer who goes above and beyond for their community. Well, today you're going to meet one of those individuals. Peter Dunn has dedicated most of his life to the community of Tarlee. This sheep and cropping farmer joined the Tarlee Hall and Community Service at the age of 23. He is now 82. Spanning over 5 decades, I think you would agree the Tarlee community has been very lucky to have him. In this interview, Peter reflects back on the years supporting his community, the uncertain future of town halls, and what he hopes for Tarlee in the future. This is Peter Dunn's story.
Well, I took the job of Secretary and Treasurer then. I was talked into it, but I followed on from my parents and my grandparents that were all fairly well involved in community stuff, and it wasn't a difficult job. I felt that we all got a responsibility to spend a bit of our time in the community. It just continued on for a long period of time as Secretary and Treasurer.
How long's a significant period of time? You have given me a heads up, and it's quite amazing the amount of service you've put into the community.
It was about 56 years, but I got out of the secretary job at one stage and was only the treasurer. We've got a fairly good record of what we did in that time.
Can you highlight anything in particular that you're super proud of being part of that service?
Well, just maintaining the building and upgrading the oval and things. We kept everything in fairly good order down there, and my last hurrah was to organise the bullnose veranda on the eastern side of the Tarlee Hall. We had contacts in Adelaide of builders and an architect, and they were prepared to do something for a small town. So it was all done at more or less cost price. It was done for half the cost of a normal quote. It's made a big difference to the building down there.
So over the last 56 years, apart from maintaining the hall and the bullnose veranda as your big last hurrah, what were some events that were showcased at the hall, things that really brought the community together?
Over that period of time, there was a lot of things happening in the hall, and it was a major entertainment spot. Latter years, it was the Tarlee discos were a very popular event, and they had lots of those. But going back before that, it was the balls on Friday nights and dances on Saturday nights, and they were everywhere. And we were very fortunate that was the time that I was getting around to, and we had a lot of fun.
The hall was the epicentre of all things social and community in the Tarlee area. So it was very important to make sure that building was kept up to scratch, would you say?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, entertainment was all very good in those days. And prior to all that, there was a lot of things happening in the Tarlee Hall. Concerts, amateur hours, and all sorts of things when entertainment was very important.
So what happens now then? Because you don't have the dancers.
Everybody stays home and watches their television.
What do you use the town hall for these days?
It is being used a lot less, and this is a trend around all country halls, that they're a costly thing to maintain, and they all belong to the council. They're not being used quite as much. There's not the entertainment on. There's still meetings and that type of thing. Yeah, so everybody is concerned about the management of the hall.
Do you feel that the future of country halls or country town halls is limited?
It's decreased a lot, the benefit of them, and a lot of towns have got a sports centre or something that they're using and not using their hall, and it is a major concern.
Do you think the money that the community raises and council money should be filtered into something else apart from country town halls these days?
No, they are looking at that at the present time, but the council agree that it's their responsibility to provide a meeting place in every town. And because Tarlee hasn't got any other meeting places, it's very important that the hall continues.
56 years of service. Who's the person that took over from you when you retired? Big shoes to fill.
It wasn't that easy, but there's a whole lot of newer people now, younger people in the town, in the district, that are keen to be involved and get some more things happening. But the local bakery proprietor took on the job, but wasn't that keen on doing it. Didn't last too long. I was still the book checker when he was doing it. Actually, an ex-member of our family, our daughter is now the treasurer. But I'm not going to be the book checker now. She's the treasurer.
You're also involved with table tennis and bowls.
Certainly table tennis was strong for quite a long time, and that went well. That was in the Tarlee Hall. And then tennis has always been our major sport. Prior to all that, there was a football team in Tarlee, and I was the weedy little boundary umpire. And it was still remember that it was the most embarrassing times of my life.
Why?
I couldn't throw the thing in high enough and far enough. I was quite small then. But football went for quite a few years in Tarlee till that died. And tennis has always been strong in Tarlee. And
still is now because of the facilities have been upgraded, I understand?
Still is. The facilities, the courts have been resurfaced, or they've been moved twice into different locations, but now they're in a good location and a new wire on the outside, and now they're putting lights on it this year because they've still got a senior team, but they've got 2 junior teams as well, so the future for tennis looks quite good.
What would you like to see happen in Tarlee to keep it thriving into the future?
Well, you'd like to see perhaps some more businesses involved in the town. There is engineering works that build a lot of bulk handling grain equipment, but just got a bakery, and that's given the town a great boost as far as, of course, Tarlee's on the main North Road, so it gets a lot of traffic. So the bakery is well known, and it certainly suits a lot of us locals too. Small towns are really getting the stick these days. Businesses are not surviving and things, so...
Do you think that the council has serviced the Tarlee community satisfactorily over the years?
Oh yes, I think we've always had a good relationship with the council, and the council appreciate that Tarlee people are happy to get organised and do a lot of work themselves rather than relying on contractors, and always had a few good workers around the town, and we've done a lot of things ourselves, but the council are generally very good to us, I think.
Because you were sort of dragged into the role when you were 23. It wasn't something that you wanted to do. It was just something that your parents were involved in, and you stuck with it for 56 years. What was it about being involved in that service for that long?
It's always good to be involved, and it was no hardship for me to continue that job, but there's other jobs now at the bowling club and things that are taking much more of my time, and people appreciate the time you put in. This is a great little community, and that's its real strong point at the present time. It's a good farming area and reliable, and so it's been a good community to live in. A lot of people would seem amazed, the new people that come to Tarlee seem amazed that we've lived here all our life, where most people move around a lot. Yeah, I think we've been lucky.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Peter, for having me here and for speaking to me on the Clare Valley Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you for that. I don't consider myself the brightest spark in the area, but it's nice to have contributed. Thank you.
That's Peter Dunn from Tarlee. Well, Peter believes there's a future for the local town hall. It will be interesting to see whether the community of Tarlee will take ownership of the hall, because currently the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council is reviewing many of its built assets and gifting them to community groups in a move to save funds. Andrew Christensen is the Council's Director of Development and Community and is leading the charge on this review.
So basically we're looking at the number of buildings that we have within our community, focus on 30 specific ones that we're just reviewing what the future of those assets might be going forward. Part of the review is talking to each of the community groups that exist out there and seeing what the future of those assets might be, and then looking at either leasing, selling, gifting, or keeping them in the status quo for those buildings into the future.
Can you give me an idea of what assets we're talking about?
Well, there's a variety of assets out there. There's things like town halls, community buildings, club rooms, which are currently being utilised by football clubs and cricket clubs and the like. I can't think of the rest off the top of my head. There's about 30 of them, but there's quite a few different varieties.
And all the town halls?
All the halls we're looking at the moment. We've currently done a separate project for Riverton and Clare Town Hall, as they're the largest ones, I suppose, in the community, to look at what we can do for that. But that's a separate project going on. But we're looking at all the town halls within the in the council area, that amongst many other buildings as well. So,
why are you doing this?
There's a number of reasons. Council has a lot of buildings on its books, so and it's always good to review what buildings we've had and how they're currently being utilised. There's also the fact that these buildings cost council, and therefore the ratepayer, a lot of money in terms of maintenance and depreciation. And if they're not heavily being utilised or not being utilised well, then we need to assess what we're going to do with them in the future. Some things just, they run out of their useful life, and we need to review that, and whether council wants to continue to maintain those assets into the future, or potentially, maybe sell them off or gift them or lease them out to community organisations going forward.
How much money is it costing council to maintain these buildings?
It sits on our depreciation schedule. Depreciation works a little bit different than the way that we look at depreciation. So we look at depreciation, our house depreciates, that's great, because then it reduces our income and then we get some money back from the tax man. However, in council land, it doesn't work like that. It's just it's just a cost to council's operational budget. And I think it's approximately around depreciation on all council assets. So all council assets are depreciated. That means your roads, your stormwater, everything is depreciation. That's about $6 million per year, and council's budget is about $18 million. Don't quote me on those numbers, but that's approximate around that. So it's an enormous cost to council's budget. Now, that's not necessarily a problem because we're maintaining assets like our roads and stormwater, etc. But with built assets, some of the buildings, if they're not haven't got a useful life, then we should be reviewing that going forward. And I think it's around about $500,000 per year in terms of depreciation on those specific buildings. But again, don't quote me on that number. They're very, very, very round figures, but significant cost to the ratepayer going forward. So
you've been approaching the community and consulting the communities on this. What has been the response from most communities?
Well, some of these conversations have already been going on for quite some time. So, for example, we've been speaking about Mortlock Park down in Mintera and Manura, their Centenary Park facilities down there, which is their club rooms and the like. We've been having conversations with them for actually years about signing up a lease for them. So the conversations have been quite good, but also they want to know all the detail, you know what I mean? Because essentially it will become their asset and their responsibility. So I think it's more of a cautious interest, if that makes any sense. But also, some of it's different towns have different views towards different things. So, by way of example, in Auburn, we're having conversations with them about the future of the Auburn Library and the RSL building down there, and they've been looking at positively because they're like, we could be able to maybe put our visitor information services in. So they're looking at it kind of like, actually, we could do something really great with that if we had that.
If we own it.
If we own it, yeah, correct. Or there's other ones where people just hadn't even thought about it. That building's just been sitting there, basically been doing nothing for years, and no one's really asked them the question before. So, and they're like, maybe we can do X with it. And also, in some situations, a big thing about this is that if council did sell the asset, council wouldn't actually take the money and just put it in general revenue. The money would stay within the specific town in which it is located. So if you sold a institute in Watervale, for example, all the money that's generated from that would go to the Watervale community, and they could be able to spend it on other things within their community. That
it's not going to be used somewhere else.
No, that's right. It will stay within that township, and I suppose that's where some of the people's concerns are, obviously, is that, oh, great, you're going to sell my town hall, and then that just results in a new town hall in Clare. You know what I mean? People don't want that.
No.
So that's really been important, because they're like, well, if you're going to sell it, where does the money go? It's like, oh, well, it actually goes back to you guys, and you can do it on something that you've been wanting to do for ages. And I think that changes the conversation around a lot more. So,
but they're essentially being given something, and
Yep.
it's up to them to maintain it.
That's correct. It's essentially their asset. So going forward, it goes off of council's books onto theirs, you know.
I guess their concern then is, do they have the money to maintain it?
Correct. That is very correct. So it is a concern, and that's kind of where their caution comes from, obviously, because you don't want to just be like, oh, great, I've got this asset, and it's like, well, the roof is falling in, or that sort of thing. So that's kind of why the conversations have been going for a while, because they've got to think about those sorts of things going forward. But at the same time, it's their asset. They can utilise it the way that they want to. They might want to do, like in Auburn, the visitor information services, or run a business out of there, or rent it out, or use it for something else that they specifically want to do. Because when it tends to be your building, you will utilise it as best as possible. When it's someone else's building, you don't have that sort of incentive to make the best of it, sort of thing. So, yeah.
And how do you gauge if that building is being used enough?
Well, we speak to the community groups at the moment, and it's pretty obvious that some of them are rarely used.
Because back in the day, they were used a lot.
Absolutely. But things change, you know. Halls, institutes, or other community buildings, you know, people don't go for the Sunday ballroom dance anymore, you know. But that's not to say they don't have value, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
there's history there.
There's a bit of cultural connection, which you can completely understand. Some of these buildings, you know, they might be 100 years old, or, you know, thereabouts. So I can understand why they're not only cautious about the future, but they've also got a cultural connection to that building as well. So the reality is, a lot of these buildings are actually heritage listed. So the thought about them being knocked down and someone just developing it, it's in most instances you can't actually do it. So
how do you get around that?
Well, you can develop heritage buildings. It's not a problem. Heritage buildings, actually, they're better if they're developed and utilised. What I noticed in my role is that around this region, actually most country regions, people generally don't knock down buildings and put 7 houses on them. That's more of an Adelaide thing to do. People would generally, if they're going to buy something, they will actually buy it because of the heritage, because they like that about the building and they want to enhance that. So I think there's that sort of element of protection around some of these buildings as well. Yeah.
Has there been any community groups that have made a decision about their buildings?
No. One that has gone to council so far and has been approved was in Riverton. In Riverton, there is what's commonly called the doctor's house. So the doctor resides there at a decent rent, essentially. A benevolent trust actually approached council or administration and said, look, we'd actually like to have that property, and then we can generate funds to then distribute those funds to health services in Riverton. That's what they currently do. They actually have a bunch of dough invested in the bank, but interest rates are so low at the moment, they're not generating really any money out of it. So they thought this could be a win. They could keep the doctor, because it's an incentive for the doctor to stay in Riverton. It'd be a win. They can take it, comes off of council's books. They own the building. They can make money out of the rent, and then they can redistribute that to that. So it's all like win-win-win, really. That has actually been gifted to, well, it's in the process of being gifted to them.
If a decision can't be made,
yeah,
what do you do?
If they say, look, we don't want it sold or anything like that, we would have to talk to the council and say, well, which way do you want to progress with this building? Do you want to keep it? Do you want to sell it, knowing how the community feels? You know, that sort of stuff. Because the motion that we got from council is that we look at reducing the number of built assets that we've got, but do that in consultation with the community.
Andrew Christensen, the Council's Director of Development and Community. Andrew hopes the review will be completed by the end of the year.
A word for the music. Okay, here we go.
Originally planned for August last year, the region's Naidoc celebration finally took place at the end of January. Everyone was invited to heal country and come and share in the region's rich First Nations culture. There was weaving, Torres Strait Islander and Ngadjuri dancing, cooking demonstrations of damper and roux-tail stew, panel discussions and presentations by artists. Such an insightful and knowledgeable event. It was my first Naidoc event, and I definitely will be going to the next one. Enjoy all the colour and celebration of this cultural event.
Katie, we're from Brinkworth. Yeah, we're Arabana Bangala from Lake Eyre region. I did come because I wanted to see the Ngadjuri weaving, see how it differs from the way I do it, which it slightly does.
So tell me a bit about your family or your history.
I'm actually in the process of still trying to track it back as far as I can possibly get it, but my nana, her father and his brother and mother were in a camp at Tarlee for half-castes. They're on the 1909 list of half-castes in South Australia. Currently in the process of getting more information so I can access birth records, which is quite hard to do. Before a certain date, you're actually not allowed to have access to the birth certificate. You have to contact Link Up or organisations such as similar to those, and then they can get it for you, but it's actually archived, so it's not public information. So yeah, that's a bit annoying.
Do you want to go back to where it all began? Like you said, you're from the Lake Eyre area. Have you been up there?
No, but we actually are planning a trip this year to go up there.
Hey, my name is Pepper Micken and I'm from Kapunda, which is also on Ngadjuri country, and I'm here representing regional council. It is a work thing, but also a good way to come up and make different connections and see different parts of the community.
I'm Abby Walker-Schwartz. I'm from Waterloo. I work at the Kapunda Kindy, which is also a Ngadjuri country. I'm here to meet some artists and hopefully try and replicate something in Kapunda with our kindergarten.
Hello everyone, my name is Eddie Peters, aka very black. I mean, not that black, but anyway, I originally come from the Torres Strait Islands, which is not at the far north Queensland of Australia, at the very tip between Papua New Guinea and the tip of Queensland or Australia. 1990 I came down to study music at the Centre for Aboriginal Study in Music, which is called CASM. So I came down to study music and decided to stay in Adelaide.
What got you into music? Where does that passion come from?
Because in the islands we love music, we love singing and dancing. It's part of our culture, and we sing every time when we and dance when we have a big feasting or ceremony in the islands. And but in the 40s, music, different style of music been introduced to the islands, and people began to pick up guitar and play guitar, and we watch and learn from our uncles or older brothers playing guitar, and so we learn of them. Yeah.
So what do you play?
I play guitar, drums, bass, and also when I came here, I studied saxophone and play bass.
Now, you mentioned some of the instruments before, but there's some unusual looking instruments here that I've actually never seen before. Can you tell me a bit about these?
Yeah, that's our traditional island drum. In our language, we call it warup or burubur. We use that for when we have feasting, ceremonies, and that's been part of our culture for over thousands of years. And because in the old days, when they do play the drums for the ceremonies, and in the old days they were headhunters. They were wearing headdress, play the drums before they go out fighting. So on their return, they take the head back. But today we don't do that now. But we still continue play the drums and the turtle shell. That's from Port Douglas. But in the islands we have a lot of turtle, and we make turtle mask and use that for our decoration and all that for ceremonies. Yeah.
So you get the knife and you cut the celery along this way. So it's like a Z, okay? Come this side, bub. That's the girl. No, that's it. hang on to the celery there, and then push the knife down. See how that goes like that? That's the way Aunty Pat wants you to cut it. There you go.
So, Aunty Pat, where are you from?
Let me sit down, love. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Because I was born in Alice Springs. And my mum and grandmother, we shifted up to Alice Springs because my nana, Kate Warrior, married a Vincent Copley. And he was a white man. So in South Australia at them days, if you were a white man and consulted with a black woman, you were put in jail, which Alan Copley was. He was put in jail for 3 months. And then as soon as he got out of jail, they left for Alice Springs. And so my mum and Aunty Josie Agius and Uncle Vincent Copley, they went up to Alice Springs to stay with Nana, great Nan. And so that's where my mum met my father, and she had me and my sister. So we were born in Alice Springs. After things got a little bit easy in the state, we went back to our home, which we were forced out of by the government. We went back to Point Pearce. And
when was that?
That was in the early, because I was born in 1948 in Alice Springs. Gee, I feel really ancient now. I think my memories started to come to me when I was about 10 or 11, 9 or 10 or 11. But I grew up on Point Pearce, and that was the best time of my life.
What was it about growing up there in that community?
Well, it was with all my family. But the other thing is that even though we were living in a home and being assimilated in a white fella's world, come Christmas or school holidays or any holidays, we would exit the community, all that white structure and everything, and move and camp down Guggathy, which is near the beach near Port Victoria. And we slept on the ground, in the tents, fished and hunt like we were in the old days. And they were the best ever days of my life.
Does that happen anymore?
No, simply because the people who live in Point Pearce at that time are all gone now. Younger generations are more into gaining something, like working, looking for money, wanting big things in their life. And I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that for us in them days, it wasn't so much of a deal because we had nothing in the beginning. But we wanted a future for our kids that will be better, and they have got a better life, but it's all assimilating into the general society that we live in today.
We're here today at the Naidoc event and you're cooking rutile stew. Is that one of your specialties?
Well, I hope it tastes all right. Well, I think the specialty I have, the gift that I could give to the community is encouraging our young fellas to stay strong in their culture and stay connected to their land, and more to stay connected to family, because we need each other very much these days. Our families, we're struggling. There's lots of, people in the jail. A lot of people with loss and grief. There's lots of heartache in our community lately. And so I want to encourage our young men and women to be strong in themselves, in their identity and their culture, because that's how they survive this racism and this uncertainty and the attitudes,
Looking back now, has it been a good life or has it been a tough life?
No, it's been a really good life. I wouldn't want it any other way, because I've been overseas, America, PNG, in my national hat that I had on when I was younger with a Nazi women's group, travelled everywhere in Australia. I've always been an active fighter for justice, social justice for Aboriginal people. My mum taught me that, Winnie Branson. Uncle Vincent Copley, who's my blood uncle, taught me those things. So I just followed in their footsteps, and I hope that my grannies, my children, follow in my steps to continue to fight for the social justice of our people, because it's not over yet for us, and it would never be until the last man standing, and that's going to be a long while yet.
Let's just go back to what's happening here today. And you said building a bridge and educating the next generation, non and Indigenous. You're cooking up a storm over there. There's the root-tail stew. There's a bit of a story behind cooking kangaroo. Tell me, why is it such a tradition in Aboriginal culture?
Well, remember in those days when our life was, we lived off the bush. The kangaroo was our meat subsidy. So every part of that kangaroo got used. So we would catch it, burn off the fur, clean it out. Most of the stuff inside we would cook and eat. But the best part of it was a kangaroo tail, which we got today. Mind you, we haven't got a stew pot to put it in. For us, it was chuck on the fire. Literally, yes.
Lovely and charcoal.
Yeah, but the charcoal was all right, because what that did was made the meat sweeter. And then once you got the skin off and the charcoal off, it was just all sweet meat.
Would a whole kangaroo feed an entire community?
Yeah, it sure would. And we would cook it, clean it, smoke it, and have it for a few days to live on until we had to go hunting again.
Do you still eat it normally?
I certainly do. I love it. I can't wait for a feed now.
Ladies, boys, you follow me. And we're going to move from left to right. Come on.
Parry Agius. I own my own business called Linking Futures, and I'm also a Ngadjuri person here. My family comes from the mid-north region. I come to the Clare Naidoc week activity, and this is my second time.
What's the significance of events like this, Parry? I mean, why is it so important?
Two reasons. One is that the Ngadjuri people are just coming back into the region. They're reconnecting back to their traditional lands and their country, even though the land is owned and worked by the general community. You know, people, farmers, local towns who've grown up out of the early days and become regional towns and towns of significance. People from Adelaide and other places have moved into the region, whereas the Ngadjuri community haven't been here. The last 3 to 5 years, through the efforts of our elders, and one of those was old Vince Copley. He was one of those drivers to bring about a relationship with Mid-North, Ngadjuri people and the peoples of the Mid-North. When we seeing today's Naidoc and last year's Naidoc and the year before, it's really about Ngadjuri descendants coming back and saying, this is our place. We know it's owned by somebody else, but this is our place. And why can't we come back? We, the Ngadjuri people, want to come back and want to feel comfortable about coming back, and knowing that somewhere down the track, you know, we might be able to contribute to the region in our way and become a citizen in this area.
Nailu Ini Alinya Kobi Ekaman. I'm a Yankunytjatjara poet living on Ngadjuri country in South Australia.
I am Mitchell Somerville from Torres Strait Islands, Mabiarg, up the top of Queensland.
Yeah, so I was born on Kaurna country and stolen away from my family there. So I grew up on Ngadjuri country, went to Brinkworth Area School and Clare High School. I've always ran away and come back, travelled a lot. I live on Ngadjuri country now, and I've been really blessed with the poetry career that started out in the desert when I finally found my family, and was living out in the desert with my traditional mob. It's been a journey I could never have imagined. I found my voice in poetry. Poetry taught me to stand strong in my story. Been blessed with national and international recognition, which has allowed me to continue learning both in Australia and overseas, and bring that knowledge back to where I live on Ngadjuri country, and share those skills in poetry workshops and working with children.
Speaking of, Mitchell's here with his poem. And Mitchell, before you read your poem called Hope and Healing, I want to know a bit of background behind this, why you wrote this.
Well, I could clearly see that the Ngadjuri land was not being taken care of, so I think this poem should help people improve and help the Ngadjuri country to get better.
Okay, take it away.
From polluted oceans to crystal clear water, from rubbish in cities to fresh air and clean, clear land, from cut down trees and empty land to beautiful bushland and fresh, clean air, from dirty, swampy rivers to clean, flowing water, from meanness and fighting to kindness and friendship, from us and them to all of us together, from pain and sadness to hope and healing. This is our country.
Well done. How old are you, Mitchell?
I am 9 years right now.
How does this make you feel when you see a 9-year-old writing something like this?
Yeah, it's very moving. I judged the poetry competition alongside Ngadjuri elder Aunty Pat Waria-Read, and we were both very moved by the poetry and also the dioramas that other children had made. It's so rewarding as a grandmother to see the bravery of young people learning our history and speaking it straight out. It's something that I know as a child, history was denied me, but I always knew there was something missing, and I'm really blessed that I did find it later in life. It's a joy to see the strength of our children.
I'm Nat Somerville, and I'm the chair of the organising committee for the Naidoc event, Hill Country.
So Nat, it pretty much just finished. What was your take on the event? Are you happy?
Yeah, it was a real, relief, I think is the word. The day was amazing. Everything worked as planned.
What do you hope to achieve by doing events like this? I mean, this is your 4th one in the Clare Valley. Is it fitting its purpose?
Oh, absolutely. So, the purpose of this event is to really share culture and celebrate cultures within our community, with all community, our whole Mid-North community, both Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or not. Everybody, has been welcome to this event, and, we want to do more of it to, get the message out there so everyone can be proud of our cultural history of this place especially.
I love how you had the taste of the Torres Strait Islander culture as well, with all the music and that's your background, I understand.
That's right. So my my cultural roots are from the Torres Strait Islands in Western Islands, of a little island called Mabiag. So my clan group is Wagatagum. It's very special to me to have share some of that culture, that Torres Strait Islander culture here today with the Clare community. It's really powerful for myself and my family to have that here on this country.
And you've been down here 20 years now, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. So it's 20 years of learning about this country and the people from this country and this community in general, and working together to try and get that message out there that let's be proud and share in this cultures that we have, in our own backyard.
It's my first Naidoc event. I learnt a lot. So, Nat, I think you did a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so good to hear. Someone who's been here for the first time to appreciate and take something home with them.
Thank you.
All the atmosphere and personality and cultural goodness from Clare's Naidoc event. Hope to see you at the next one. There's also some great photos of the event on the council's Facebook page if you'd like to check that out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you've got a spare moment, a little rating or a review goes a long way. Plus, if there's any local events or issues that you would like to see highlighted on the podcast, don't hesitate to get in contact. Also, if there's any hidden gems or unsung heroes in your community, I'd love to hear from you. The Clare Valley Podcast is brought to you by the Clare and Gilbert Valleys Council. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer. Catch you next time.